Uh, well,
Hey Matt, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Brent?
Yeah, doing well.
Happy New Year.
Likewise.
I'm just kind of getting back into the swing of things after moving. Um, most of the boxes are gone.
Glad to hear. How's the move?
Oh, it was really good. We just didn't expect to be doing it when we did it.
That's fair.
We had a landlord when faced with, hey, your wood stove doesn't work. The chimney's not safe, and there's a bunch of other problems with this place, and winter is coming. It's getting cold. And they said, um, we don't want to fix it. Would you please move? Here's some money. So we're like, okay, I guess we will plan to move in a week and then move for December 1st. No problem. Oh, it was a bit, and then I had to deal with some family medical stuff with my mom. But yeah, I'm happy that it's a new year. How about yourself? Did you have a good holiday and whatnot?
Yes, I had a wonderful holiday.
How's it going with Zarf and air gap stuff?
It's been going well. Kind of moving along on all fronts. We're kind of trying to work towards a V1 here this year. So
Hmm.
trying to
The V1
Zarf.
of Zarf itself. Okay.
Yeah. Which is a variety of things. We kind of want to reel back in the experimental phase of Zarf. That we've kind of been in for a couple years now and say what things do we actually want to maintain going forward. So like that's a heavy part of the conversation, and then also come back around to what's missing, what things do we need to properly implement before V1.
Yeah, I guess air gapping is something that has a bunch of moving parts, like guac, would be a good way to do that. Um, so I have some updates, like while I wasn't sort of super online, I did have some time for like reading and things like that. Hi, Evan.
Hello.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm actually online now. I thought I would be online a couple weeks ago, but then holidays and unpacking, and
Yep.
now I'm online. Um, Brant was just saying that
This
he's
is work being done by volunteers in their spare time. I recognize that.
yeah. Brant was just saying that he's driving towards V1 for Zarf. Um,
Ah,
and that's moving along. I had a chance to see your KubeCon talk, um, Evan,
okay.
on I don't know if you did multiple yet. I'm still working through the KubeCon playlist.
I assume that you're talking about the one about we're all suppliers and it's okay.
Yes, that's exactly the one I'm talking about. It
Yeah, for
occurs to me
consumers. Yeah.
that some of the tooling that we built to go collect, like, are SBOMs being built and is Trivy being used or is that being used or this or that?
Yeah.
Um, that stuff collects branch protection rules. So like you had talked through a couple scenarios. One of them was branch protection rules.
Hmm.
And you were talking about it's either a framework or a tool called Baseline, I think.
Baseline is more of a framework than it's a set of guidance.
Right. So it occurred to me that some of the stuff that we have, not that I'm going to do anything with it now, but some of the stuff we have that basically calls the GitHub API and slurps down all kinds of info about repos, branch protection rules are part of that. Um,
Uh,
and all of that stuff is then queryable. So like it got me
there are
thinking.
many tools for doing this.
Oh,
Yes.
of course, yeah. But my point was, it got me thinking, like, what's the current state of like how automatable or automated already is security baseline? Like, if you're like, here, I've got these 1,000 repos or 500
There
repos.
are at least two or three projects involved that are
Oh, good.
working on measuring baseline in
Oh,
various
great. So
ways.
that's like art. There's already projects working on it, and
Yes.
it's okay. But yeah, some of the scenarios you were thinking through or talking through, not just that one,
Yep.
but it occurred to me that like some of the work that we're doing here, while
I was deliberately
talking.
not diving into specific technologies.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I was kind of curious,
They're
like, is it
there.
already, all right, what are they
Yeah.
called out of curiosity, just so I can,
There is a project called Privateer. There is a
oh,
project
privateer.
called Minder. There is a project called OpenSSF Scorecard.
And that's the one I know.
Okay. Those are the
Privateer
three that I'm
scorecard.
most aware of.
You said private tier
There's
scorecard,
also something called Darn and Darn It that Mike Lieberman has been working on that I don't know what its status is.
as in to darn a sock, or oh
Yes.
gosh darn. Oh, okay. What was the second
Well,
one?
perhaps both.
You said privateer, OpenSSF scorecard, darn it, but there was
And
a
Minder.
minder. Privateer. Thank you for humoring me. It's off topic, but capital B baseline, right? In one word.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Cool. Awesome. So an update that I have one thing I did figure out sort of over Christmas and have a working prototype of, and in 2 weeks I could demo it because it's all primordial now. But as you know, the tooling that scrapes all this stuff so we can find S bombs and attestations and other things, and just build up this data set right now has two main issues. One, it's repo based, not project based. Now I've got a
Hmm.
project to repo mapping and the data model and things like that, but really what we need is a more holistic understanding. And for now, what we have is okay. But some of the work from the landscape graph that defines that data model that's inclusive of things like tags as well as projects and contributors and repos and organizations, all of that stuff does actually exist in a well-formed way. And I'm kind of viewing that as like a nice scaffolding that we could use for reporting so we don't have to go reinvent all of that. I think the primary challenge has been so in addition to pulling things like branch protection rules and all of the GitHub actions and all of the other metadata that we can get from the GraphQL API, um, um, uh, I lost my train of thought. I'm all nervous. So
You
we
wanted to, yeah, go ahead.
no after you.
I was going to say, it looked like you had a topic about how to actually query to find the answers, and there was some question as to what, you know, how we should express.
Yeah, thank you. So security insights. So in addition to branch protection rules and the other
Hmm.
things, because the GraphQL API can get files, if there's a security insights file um, in any of the two locations it can be, it's actually there's four variants it could be.
Yeah,
But
and
anyway,
I'm
but we
fully
pull all of
aware.
that. We
Yes.
talked about it before. In looking at that for the all of the CNCF projects, it's really hit or miss, more miss than hit. You know,
Oh yeah. No,
there's a good
I'm aware
cluster.
of that too.
Yes, we talked about that. So it's kind of like syncing from last year. I think that there is maybe we take it to the TOC or take it to tag security. But in some way, I think that we should have a blast out to the community of project maintainers that says, hey, like there's this thing called security insights, and it's a well-formed data model, particularly the V2. And so, we might get a lot of stuff for free, both in terms of what are the important, relevant repos that are part of the project, which was another big story
Um,
in your talk, as well
I
as
I wouldn't
existing.
count it as for free unless you have a tool to fill it out for people.
No, no, no. I'm more meant on the data collection side. Like the
I
more people
understand that
use
you'd
that.
like someone else to do the data collection for you, which is
No,
fine,
I
but
I'm
it's
more.
not for free.
Correct, it's not for free. I was being hyperbolic. What I meant was there is a way that is self-serve that does scale in a grassroots kind of way for projects to declare all kinds of stuff, particularly the V2 schema of that. So I don't know if from this initiative we should do it. Or the reason I'm talking about it here is like I'm not sure what the right venue is to send a blast out to projects, either from the TOC, the tag, or this initiative, or some combination to say, hey, there's this thing you might not be aware of called security insights. So like the more people engage with existing ways to report stuff about their project, um, for free, in my mind, means the tooling we already have that processes all that would benefit from having more data
I,
in that well-formed thing. It's not the answer, but
I
I
think
wanted
we
to
need to
highlight it.
show that the tooling that we've got provides enough benefit
Sure.
that it's worth asking every project to go do this and to do the, you know,
Yep.
TPM work to make
Exactly.
them, go do that.
Right.
Um,
So perhaps
Having
in a
worked in
month
a lot of
or
organizations where horizontal efforts, meaning things that every team needed to do just a little bit of work on, were thought of as for free.
oh
Um,
yeah, I
it
understand
turns
the
out really
trigger.
badly, and you're
Yeah.
speaking in those patterns here, and
Nope,
so
that's a
I'm
good
going to
call out.
push back on it until we can show that, like, clearly and obviously, we can show you that projects that have this get enough benefits that it's worthwhile.
Mhm. Yes.
And I'm not convinced that we have that yet, just because it would make our, initiative easier.
Sure. That's a great call out, both on the language as well as the substance. Um, I didn't mean to use triggery language like for free.
Oh no,
It's obviously
it's
not
the
free.
pattern that's triggering, not the
Yeah.
language.
Yeah, I have another triggery pattern, which is like, oh, we need some stuff. Let's do a survey and do this like one-off data collection. And so my only point was that when, if and when we can show that value, um, I would like to reuse existing things, not make
Absolutely.
yet another, yet another standard. Um, the second update that I had from over the December-ish timeframe is I've fallen in love and found useful a Cipher-based in-memory embeddable graph database. Think DuckDB, but uses Cipher instead of SQL, and is optimized for what most other graph databases, licensing and commercial issues aside, of which there are many. We don't need to get into the whole Neo4j or
Yeah.
TigerGraph or any of these other cipher-based things. But I put something in the notes that's just a little example of our prime directive for this initiative, which is a CVE came out, what's impacted, and this is sort of pseudo SQL, and the actual CTEs are quite a bit bigger if you take into account checking for cycles in the graph, which you need to do. But just even with a trivial example, dealing with recursive common table expressions in SQL to go walk dependency trees, in a SQL style database like Postgres, versus something that's done in Cypher
Do
using graph
do
traversals.
we have cycles?
Uh, no, I was just saying when you're doing recursive dependency stuff,
But
you can very easily write very messy SQL that doesn't check for loops and things. And I don't know that we
well, I
have
guess my
cycles.
question was, is that something that occurs in our data? I don't know. I'm not saying
I
it
don't
does,
know
and I'm not
either.
saying it doesn't.
I think the potential is there for it for projects that have a lot of different binaries that they generate that aren't all linked together in one process at the same time. At least, back of the napkin, like I would assume somehow there might be some cycles, maybe not for the same version of a package, but um, most linkers and stuff deal with that. But my only point in what I put in the notes, and it's a tiny little example, is that working with Cipher is both computationally much more efficient to the point where a lot of things don't require a big database, even though the data can be big, and maintaining and writing Cipher for transitive dependency analysis is oodles simpler than the SQL counterparts. So I kind of from just a maintainability perspective. So I've I won't go into detail now. I'll schedule something for the future, but there's a database that kind of came out of academic research that was inspired by DuckDB called KuzuDB. KUZU,
Mhm.
KUZU. Just late last year. The archive, the repo is archived, and there were two forks that emerged. One is called Ladybug DB, which doesn't seem to have much movement. The other is Ryu Graph, RYU Graph. And what's really cool is that we've already got all of the data we're collecting landing in DuckDB using Parquet or whatever as a backing store. What Ryu has as a big claim to fame is it's crafted the same way. It's in memory, it's embeddable, and it's strictly typed. So you make node tables and edge tables. And since it's kind of came out of DuckDB architecturally or spiritually, it can connect directly to DuckDB, or using the Python client, you can make queries against DuckDB and then with zero copy semantics ingest into a graph. Most of
Okay.
the other graphs, even if we did use them, are row or transaction based. So this is sort of like a columnar store under the covers, where if I've got a bunch of data, and DuckDB can connect directly to Postgres, for example, as well. You can very quickly materialize a graph over the same data. You could even do it in place, but then there are other problems with that. So in taking that line of thinking for all the data we already have, it's really graph based, but expressed in a bunch of tables. We can quickly make a graph and then use Cypher to answer questions that we want to answer, like the one that I put there around
Hmm.
transitive dependencies. Um, it's even more pronounced when you look at licensing rug pulls, because then you have even. Uh, but then lastly, um,
How is it more pronounced when you look at those? Just out of curiosity.
um, well, it so if you're kind of looking at like I have this package and it depends on this big
Hmm.
branching tree of other dependencies. If you're doing a query like, okay, well, the base package I care about is Apache 2 or MIT, and then you're walking up this dependency graph, um, you're not just checking for like one thing. Like when you're doing the first case where you're
Hmm.
saying this is a bad package, find all paths, from
Yeah.
here to everywhere that involve this one package.
Hmm.
When you're doing it for transitive dependency checks, you're not only saying like, do I hit an AGPL or a BSD license, but
Hmm.
you also have a temporal component where you want to know when did this happen, right? So it's just what you end up writing for SQL is much more involved, uh,
Okay.
and 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 involves many more table scans and even bigger materialization of intermediate tables and all of the things that kind of plague handling tree-shaped data or graph-shaped data in SQL. Um,
Okay.
I'm painting with a big brush, but um,
Yeah.
um,
The two seemed like they were fairly isomorphic to me, was the reason I was curious why one was more than the
isomorphic.
other.
I see.
You could
Yeah,
map one onto the other.
you can. One is just way more involved, and if you've ever, I'm sure you have to write like very large SQL to do seemingly simple things with this style of data. As soon as you start layering in, like, oh, I'm going to check for this and this and this and this, and I have to do it
Mhm.
at every stage, and like you end up with a lot more. It's not a technical term, but I think it relates gobbledygook. Just like very messy, long, error-prone SQL that then
Mhm.
runs very slowly. And then if anything happens, the whole thing blows up. So yeah, so in any event, I kind of see this as a nice complement, and it's MIT licensed, um, and it could help us wrangle some of this. Um, Lastly, in looking at this too, the original design I had for um, being able to do as part of a per project or per binary build in CI generate sort of like the subgraph of just this one thing
Mhm.
that was built and its dependencies. Because it didn't have a good cipher-based, permissively licensed way to do cipher, I was like, okay, well, how can we persist this? And so I looked into RDF and NQuads and a variety
Yeah.
of other formats using GraphQL as the way in, particularly for Guac.
Mhm.
In talking with Michael Lieberman and some of the Guac folks, it's unclear whether or not GraphQL has a lot of future there.
Yeah.
And the data is already in Postgres. And
Yeah.
so I think a better way to persist what Guac builds in that CI
Mhm.
job for just that little, I'm calling it a
Yeah.
subgraph. Um, I think a more effective thing to do would be to just connect DuckDB to Postgres, pull out because the entity tables and the relationships or the edges
Mhm.
rather are already codified in SQL. It'll be
Yep.
much more performant and easier than going through this whole GraphQL persistent rehydrate layer. Now that we have a way to actually, you know, I mean, we could always do that anyway,
Mhm.
but it seems a lot simpler and chops out a bunch of work and complexity to just connect directly to Postgres, pull down the information, and then materialize it into a graph as needed. And then the last thing is we don't have to deal with RDF or some other kind of intermediate format. We can just use Parquet or either Duck or DuckDB's native format. But I kind of like Parquet better. Um, there are trade-offs. With Parquet, you end up with a bunch of files, and if you just use DuckDB's innate
Yeah.
format, it's a little bit more efficient, and you end up with a singular file that's like one artifact instead of n artifacts. So those are some things that kind of that's my current state. When
Mhm.
we get by our next meeting, which I'm not sure if we're bi-weekly or twice a monthly. Um,
It's biweekly, I believe.
okay, so then in 2 weeks, I think I can have. I'm crunching the data set now. It's still downloading, but I'm thinking from KubeCon to KubeCon, um, KubeCon 24 to KubeCon 25, the North America ones,
Mhm.
is a better chunk of data to look at to report on for this initial like where are we now versus
Mhm.
just a calendar year. Um,
Okay,
yeah, I think it's more interesting to talk about KubeCon to
sure.
KubeCon, but more critically, the data set crosses over the year boundary. So, you get automatic checking that queries and everything
Mhm.
work right across years
Yep.
versus just doing it all in one year and then discovering it later. So that's kind of my state. I also did a little reading, but not a whole lot, um, on our CRA reading list. Um, but again, that's all existing collateral that was more me catching up, and others might have already read it. But um, that's where I
Okay.
am now, at least. And
Um, I updated your scenario a little bit.
oh, cool. I mean, I did this in a hurry this morning, so
Yeah. Um,
oh, React. Okay, yeah, this is better. This is better than Hello Dash. Yeah. I mean, I really was going for Hello World style example, but I think this is a more realistic one. We have
well,
multiple.
and that was why I sort of picked it out. Um,
Not only that, like React then pulls in like just so much more.
React is a base dependency for a lot of other stuff.
Yep.
And yeah, so that seemed like it's both critical, it's all over the place. Um, the vulnerability is real bad.
Hmm. Are you talking about a specific one? A specific
Yeah.
CVE? Oh,
In early December, there was a CVE in React 19 that
oh, it's in the
was
server side.
a pre-authentication remote code execution.
Yeah, I'm
So
reading it
before
right
your
now.
middleware gets a chance to run and check any auth,
Yeah,
um,
it's just
you
wide
can
open.
execute arbitrary code on the server side.
Well, that's terrifying.
It's not good, yeah. And architecturally, React has been skating a really fine line, and it seems like they weren't quite as quite or weren't quite as clever as they thought they were.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
Because
I'm looking at the link you sent.
yeah,
Yikes! Right before Christmas.
um,
I bet
this
over
is
this
trying
holiday
to
there were
get
a
the
lot of
best of
upgrades
both
happening.
local and server side um, rendering, and they're sending back and forth partially formed objects between the two. Um, and gosh, sometimes they sent code instead of um, just data.
Why are they doing anything in this pre-auth kind of side of things?
They're trying to kind of slide between server side rendering and client side rendering transparently.
But
Um,
pre-auth, like,
well, it was in the handling of the protocol.
oh, I see.
So they built their own underlying protocol that
I was
bundled
about to ask,
together
did they make their own? Mm,
data and code execution and control. And sometimes they would interpret data as code execution or control instead, and then bad stuff happens.
yeah.
Um,
So it's almost like an injection attack, right? Where you,
oh, it's completely, yeah.
yeah, it's just not SQL. Mm.
Please run this JavaScript. And they're like, okay.
Okay.
And then bad stuff happens.
So I think a lot we're off topic, I suppose, unless we call MCP, software components that have dependencies. But like you get the same kind of thing with some MCP server
I
implementations where they're
mean,
a little
uh,
loosey-goosey
if you
on.
haven't carefully designed your MCP inputs, you get exactly the same problems. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I've actually seen
somewhat the
some
same
like
problems.
I've seen some like just on GitHub, just some MCP server examples where it's just like a parameter is just arbitrary JavaScript,
Yeah.
stringified,
I mean, if you have the authentication, it's not necessarily an undefensible security model. Here's a tool you want you what you want is, it to act like an extension of your desktop and your credentials there. And so like, yes, it's in the same security domain. Now, happening pre-auth is not awesome. So that would be a little different. Um, but other than that, yeah. The pre-auth part was the part that made this really, spectacular. But yeah, that seemed like it was relevant, and so I figured I would just adjust the scenario to, say, "Hey, you remember that thing in December?"
Yeah, I would imagine that the break between Christmas and New Year's might have had an awful lot
Well, it
of
was on December
infrastructure
3rd,
change. It was what?
so
Oh, it's
it
December
was
3rd.
announced on December 3rd.
Some organizations might not get to patching and upgrading for a CVE for, a couple weeks and now you're into Christmas.
But
So
this is one where you want to do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay.
Or they also have, some firewall rules that you could put in that would only sort of break your React app.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you for updating this little example. This is more current. I like it.
Yeah.
But it just makes the same point, right?
Yeah. I
It's
mean, it
just
makes the same point, but instead of as a hypothetical, as a, that thing over there that we just did.
mhm. Um, okay. I only had one other question really for Brant, actually. I wasn't sure if you could either point me to or have some idea from looking at doing the air gapping of guac, um, what sort of like the minimum requirements are to actually run it. If you're packaging it up and air gapping it, you might have a better understanding of size, space. Like my goal is to run sort of like, I don't want to say guac light, but guac that doesn't have to do a bunch other than look at and build out that graph for whatever was built in a CI job, just as another phase of a CI job that then generates an artifact of the guac's data, either a dump of the Postgres database. But I think if we put it into a graph and then store the graph, you get sort of deduplication out of the box. And you don't have to have a whole Postgres engine and everything. But um, do you know what that might look like, or do you have some example I can go run and measure myself? I haven't done that exercise yet, and rather than starve guac until it fails and then back off to kind of ordain that, I asked some of the maintainers and I didn't get really a solid answer. So I thought maybe empirically, or you might know just because you had your hands dirty with it more than me.
Yeah, I think as far as things go, I need to maybe get a more clear picture. I've got a repo that needs to get cleaned up and that I can actually I could probably get an example over to you shortly about like what this looks like. It'll be probably wrapped around the Zarf like primitives of a package and whatnot. So it'll be a couple step process to deploy it on kind, but really I think it all came back to like just the core guac infrastructure, um, eh, to include things like Minio if you want to be able to
Yep.
actually do some of the collection or however you're going to get your data into Guac, and some of the other baseline requirements have basically just disabled everything that was going to try to connect outward by default.
Mhm.
And so I think I can get you an example before the next meeting. But yeah, it was kind of just turning off all of the extra collectors and whatnot um, from the Helm chart. That's how I was deploying it anyway. And that seemed to work when I modified Guac to fit my Zarf use cases. There are a couple bugs that I hit along the way that I have open now in Guac as PRs, was waiting on
Mhm.
review for those, but there's
Oh,
nothing
wow.
to stop you from like deploying guac in this air gap mode and then just like trying to feed it your data via some other mechanism.
Yeah, I actually don't need the air gap aspect of it per se, because from a CI job, there's actually I actually want to run some of those collectors, to
Hmm.
generate that little, I should graphlet. I don't know. We need some diminutive term for like not a whole graph, but just
Hmm.
that piece of it. I more meant like, it's either how much like memory or cores Guac basically needs. I mean, it's all very efficient, and it's just really Postgres kind of dwarfs what Guac needs, probably, other than memory for bigger graphs. But I didn't find like a minimum requirements,
Mm.
like, but I think it seems like it's perfectly small enough and fine enough to run on your typical like CI job runners, particularly if we use like an efficient version of Postgres that's sized appropriately, or scoped appropriately rather. Um, but did you have any kind of like back of the napkin, or I can just run some tests as well? But
Yeah, I don't think I have any information on that. I think the only thing that comes to mind is the actual processing part of when you're running those collectors, I think is maybe where you're going to see some spikes.
mhm.
And so that could, maybe create a little bit of time if they're spending some time processing there. But once you get over that hurdle of like the actual collectors processing and whatnot, then I think you'd be clear. I think that sounds feasible.
Yeah, the other okay, and the other thing I thought where the air gap scenario might actually be, I often kind of think of like multiple things that are not necessarily compatible at the same time, right? So like using the air gap stuff, like I would imagine you already have some scripts or infrastructure to like pull all the packages that it would seek to go find dynamically if it had access to a network, right? I remember you talking about like Zarf will bundle up Guac, but is there like also a bundling up of what Guac would go find? Do you know what I mean? Like
Ooh.
how does that work in your air gap scenario? Like if it wants to go pull, from all the different sources it pulls from,
OSV vulnerabilities, for example.
for example, or any of the other sources. Um, is part of the bundling up for air gapping kind of, does it include like a cache of that stuff, or a like how does it actually work if it's actually air gapped? Like you must get it from somewhere else, in which
Yeah,
case,
you have to bring it with you and you have to know that it exists. Zarf
okay,
isn't maybe going to go and introspect that, that there's things that it also needs to go collect.
right. So from the air
Um,
gap scenario, you have to know what those dependencies are and generate that data and bring it. It's not going to go discover it and build it as a bundle to bring into air gap.
correct.
Okay, well, that answers my question then. So no silver bullets in software, uh, but it's worth checking for existing collateral. That's all I had in the way of updates, other than it's a new year and it's a Monday. So I'm kind of looking forward to spending some time with my keyboard, uh, instead of driving and forklifting boxes and things.
I think that as well, we should start to think about what does wrapping up the initiative look like.
Yes. Um,
Um,
in my mind, I have done some thinking about that, and it's those two questions transitive to, I won't
mhm.
reiterate, two CRA questions, as well as whatever tooling and or opt in, like, hey, here's a GitHub action you can use that generates this. Here's a clonable example so you can actually run this reporting yourself. So something that, so not just like state of the ecosystem reports, like here's all the people making S bombs, but actually like here's some tooling, CNCF Foundation, or project maintainers that you can use to generate this reporting and understand this, um, that automates what's possible. So like
um,
walk API action, that kind of stuff.
are you targeting maintainers or consumers in this?
So the primary consumer of this initiative is the CNCF itself, right?
So
So technically,
when we
but I think
started talking,
what?
when we started talking about this initiative back in August,
Yes.
we had the idea that if we had an example, end user companies would be interested in running this for themselves? Are we saying, hey, this is not something that end user companies should be expected to run at this point? Or
No,
like,
so
I'd be
so
fine with
I
ending
think
up with that as a recommendation. I just want to
as
make
a
sure
New
that
Year's
we're clarified.
recommendation, I'm working on not burying the lead. I spent a long time in academic research where you talk about all the things that are not the point before you get to the point. So I need to like in the words of Willy Wonka, strike that, reverse it. Um, uh, I posit and did back in August that the tooling or the methodologies or the reporting that the CNCF needs to handle those two big questions are also, end users that run things that comprise open source components and a whole bunch of their stuff that's not in the open. They have that same need as
But
for their own compliance with
but
the
we know that
CA.
CNCF is
Um,
also paying people to work out these answers,
right.
separate from our initiative.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, but they have a more scoped problem, right? Like they can build one big block instance and run it on Kubernetes in a heavy way and just
Yeah.
scan everything, which is what they're doing. But when you get to larger enterprises, they don't have 200 projects. They have millions of containers, right? Potentially. And so one of my hypotheses in all of this is that, what end users need and what the CNCF needs are effectively the same thing. So while like the the I don't want to say litigious, but like the direct answer to like who is the consumer of this initiative, all initiatives, the consumer is the TOC generally first, right? So like we have to nail helping them answer those two questions. But those two questions are also being asked by end users who have the same problem, but in spades, because it's not just all open, it's not just all open source stuff where, maybe the CNCF could do some reporting whatever cadence it does, however it does it, and it's immediately going to be dated, that they're not standing
Mhm.
up a live service and they're not actively scanning potentially. So, you know, I wanted to generate the tooling and the methodologies and the approaches to do this in the open. And I think it would be very useful to end users as well. And so, as a side effect of this initiative, we could build some interest around the tooling for this, the methodologies, and provide domain experts a place to maybe bring it to the supply chain community group, for example. Um,
Um,
I'm not sure what the state of that is yet, but um,
yes,
so
and
yeah, yes, and
um, I feel like we should also be relatively clear-eyed about where things actually are at and whether this is something that we've done a bunch of research, but we don't necessarily recommend people do because gaps X, Y, and Z,
mhm,
or whether this is hey, yeah, all this stuff works and you should deploy it.
right,
Because both are fine outcomes. But if the answer is it takes a whole bunch of leg and arm work to make this stuff work, here's the equivalent of a grad student research paper on this.
right.
And then you tell people to go deploy the grad student research
Well,
paper. You're wasting
I
all
don't
their
want to
money.
do that actually. I kind of want to make this more. So I think to your point, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think where you're
No,
going is like I would not feel comfortable even if we came to some results saying, and even if we had a GitHub action and these other things that could be immediately useful to both projects and end users and whomever. Like it's one thing to say, hey, here's this stuff. It's a working example that came out of an initiative. It's another thing to say, go deploy it because there's no team maintaining this now. There's no commitment from the CNCF or anybody else that this will continue to work in perpetuity. You know,
yeah,
but I think there's an opportunity, particularly since we're starting up the supply chain community group, technical community group. I can't remember the exact specific noun.
it is a
Uh,
technical community
it
group.
is
Yes,
technical community group. Yeah, I've been away for months, so I'm
that's fine.
reconnecting. Um, but it would seem to me that there is at least the potential for a community of people to coalesce around some of these tools or ideas along with other things and perhaps there's a discussion about how could this be community maintained. um, uh, I certainly don't wouldn't want to say to an end user, particularly from an initiative, yeah, go deploy this if there's no plan for maintenance and it hasn't been vetted. And I think that this initiative that's why I said initially it's like, well, give the CNCF some help for project maintainers and the foundation itself to answer these questions, hopefully
But
in a way that doesn't incur a lot of cost, on infra or a team to like run some big service. Hence
or
the
on all the
CNCF.
maintainers individually.
Exactly. So,
Like
so
that's actually much more expensive than
mhm.
centralized, team, a team needs to do this. Asking every maintainer, or every project, all 200 and, or all 300 projects to take some action is like, that's way worse than asking
Yeah,
CNCF to stand up a team.
I also don't see it as a goal to go to all CNCF projects and ask them to do something. I more consider it like a racy eye, like an inform. Like, hey, we want to inform you. There is, in the case of a GitHub action, like here's an action that you could use, and if you tie it into your CI, which is a low effort thing generally, you would get this artifact. And if you do this for your binaries, here's what you can do with those artifacts should you wish. Right? Like I think the tone is provide tools and knowledge and good practices to projects, not demand or even ask that they take a specific action, but to say like we've made some things you may find useful. Here's what it would
Yeah.
look like, and then we can show the value. And if they want to use it, they use it. Right. The same is true with guidance on the CRA. Um, here's a reading list that you might want to give your security to. But
Yeah.
there's no demand or ask to your point because that's multiplicatively expensive, geometrically
Yeah.
expensive. Right.
The only thing more expensive than that is asking end user organizations to do something.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Just because I think end user organizations would find it useful does not mean I want to ask them to do something. And there's no
Well,
venue to actually ask them to do anything at all. But the supply chain and the security analysts and the people that work in those end user organizations might like to know that, hey, there's some cool new tooling coming out of open source. Um,
um,
to,
when
to
it's
make it,
ready,
yeah,
yes. And in the meantime,
yeah,
um, you know, maybe a be aware, but don't try to adopt.
yeah. Hmm. And 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 I think that if you go look at the where the security insights tooling lives, and the OSSF scorecard repos, uh, it's also the case to make a complete answer to your original question. And while I don't view this as like a we should do this, but I think it's just sitting there. Some of the other foundations that are not the CNCF actually have much higher adoption and usage of the security insights files, right?
They're
And
a lot
so I think,
smaller.
yeah, sure. But even though they're smaller, they sometimes have a lot more. But I'm
Well,
suggesting
it's
that some
easier
of
to
this,
do if you only need to do
right?
like you can
Well,
have a
exactly.
central person do 20 PRs.
Yeah. So if we do, as an outcome, come to tooling that's useful for the CNCF, I posit, I hypothesize both. It's more than a hypothesis. I think it could be useful for other foundations as well, but now that's like down the road. But like if we do come up with something that actually is useful for GFI and the CNCF folks and the projects in the CNCF, it would stand to reason that it could be useful for some of the many other foundations in the Linux Foundation. And that would provide the CNCF a way to actually export goodness, right? Which the TOC's had a goal for a while to have more collaborations like OpenSSF and CNCF. But,
Yep.
so in terms of who might find it useful, but yeah, again, that's all I've got, and I don't want to take up more time than I need to. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about? Caveat that I'm back online as of like now. I thought it would be before Christmas, but that was hubris, I think, that I could
That
not come.
happens. I don't have anything else.
Okay, I don't either. I appreciate you guys showing up. I haven't been around for a little bit, but I think, I want to wrap this up too because there's more things to move on to. But yeah, maybe we could
Great.
put like definition for done into like a GitHub milestone or something, so it's tied to like actual work items
I
that are.
mean, I feel like we could update our README to say, hey, this
Mhm.
is, this is what our expected deliverables are. You know,
Yeah,
we set
I,
this
I think
milestone, we made this progress on it, and yeah.
sure. I can take go back at doing that and have a PR ready for next time we're together, or hopefully before. It's just to read me. But cool. My famous
I
last
wouldn't
words.
say
It's
it's
just a
just
reason.
text as a, oh, hey, that makes it easier.
Yeah. No, I just meant it's not like, code and automation and CI and all that stuff.
War
Cool.
and Peace is just text.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's just text as a, oh, that makes it easy.
Yeah. I wish I could say I've read War and Peace, but I've held it in my hands
That's
before.
fine. You don't have to have. The fact that it is, an enormous, very long novel, it's just text, but
Yeah, of course. Thanks for
yeah.
keeping me honest. All right.
Okay.
Have a great day
See
and
you.
happy New Year.
Happy New Year.